Okay, welcome to the show. I'm your host, Ron Stevens. This is Rock the Boat right here on freedomslips.com, Revolution Radio. Your host for the next 2 hours. It is Sunday, the 18th of February, and it's a bloody nice day out. Went up to get a coffee. It's just about a little bit above zero, but the sun is shining, which we don't get a lot of in the wintertime here, being right beside Lake Huron. It's usually cloudy all winter, and so this is a pretty nice day. So, anyways, where are we going to go today with this show? I got so much on my mind right now, so many things I got to deal with, but we have a show to do. There's a whole bunch of stuff I want to talk about today, so this may be a little bit fractured. I was talking to a guy up at the coffee shop this morning, and we were talking about the youth and, how screwed up everything's gotten. That the youth don't seem to really want to do anything. They don't seem to have any jam, if you want to call it that. And, he was telling me stories. He's probably late 60s. He was telling me stories, that he was working when he was 11. His dad had gravel pits, and his job was to make sure the loads were leveled in the back of the trucks before they left the pit so they weren't spraying gravel all over the place. And he didn't think anything of it because that was his job in the summer. He was working with the guys, so to speak. He's a young man, and now the young men are like 30 or whatever. The government has really screwed with the school system, which was never good, but I mean, they were really screwed with it now. And it's not by accident this happened. This is all part of a long-term plan. Everything they do is part of a long-term plan. And I don't know how, it's difficult to get people to stand up because everybody that's alive now, pretty much, unless you're, 85, 90 plus, have all come through the same school system. And it's a generational process, and the generations as we come forward have been screwed with terribly. And their mindset's wrong now, completely wrong. They're not independent. They're completely dependent on the government. And that's a very bad thing. So then, you think about it. I'm in my 60s now, so I was in high school at 69. And I got out of the school system because I could see the damage it was doing, and I wanted nothing to do with it. I didn't want the state to have my mind. I didn't want the state to control my mind. And also understood everything's written down, so you can, all the knowledge you want is available. So, when you think about it, when we're trying to wake people up in this country, or in North America in general, when I looked at my fellow students back in 71, I think is when I left school, they were starting to scare me because they were getting dumber each year. They were become more passive each year. And how do you raise the level of awareness so that people can even wrap their mind around it? I mean, these people are so used to doing as the government tells them. How do we break them loose from that mindset? That's the question. And more importantly, how do we get the young people out from that mindset? Everybody's complaining. I had a chat yesterday or Friday, I guess, with a company in Calgary, and we had a very good chat. It was something I'm quite interested in. But, you know, I said, you know, the biggest problem we have here in Ontario is trying to find people that are dedicated, who can think for themselves, and you can depend on. And the lady I was talking to in Calgary said exactly the same thing. She said it's getting ridiculous. Now, our forefathers built this country with, at best, rudimentary education. You know, if they could read and write, they were doing pretty good. They could read, write, and do math, they were doing excellent. But they built this country because they were determined. If they didn't know it, they figured it out. If they didn't have it, they made it. So even, you know, I'm looking at our forefathers who came here with little to no formal education, and I look to them to be a much brighter group of people than what we have today. But like I was telling the guy I was talking to up when I was getting a coffee this morning, I remember when, I don't know how old I would have been, 16 or 17, somewhere in there, when they changed the unemployment rules so that you could, if you worked 8 weeks a year, you could collect unemployment for the rest of the year. Now, we got laid off a job or whatever, and so we had these punch cards, IBM punch cards, and there was several questions on it, like, are you willing to work, are you able to work, yada, yada, yada. So I still remember to this day, it was yes, yes, no, yes. That was the answers to the questions. So every 2 weeks, his punch card would show up, and you'd just simply go yes, yes, no, yes, and then you put it back in the envelope, and then a check would show up. And I did that for, I don't know, maybe, I'm probably thinking it was around 3 checks or something. And I got looking at it and thinking about it and scared the hell out of me. And I even told my friends, I said, you know what they're doing here, okay? They're making you dependent on the government. Now, if this punch card wasn't available, you'd go find a job. But because this punch card is available and you're young, you can work 2 months and then just trip around and fill out your punch card and send it in, and they'd send you a check. So this is not about helping you. This is about making you dependent on the government. And I never collected anything from the government after that. Because what it does is it makes you weak. And that's what they've done to this country. They've broken the spirit, the minds, and the spines of the people. Then the question is, how are you going to get them strong again? Because if we can't have strong-willed people, who understand the power of the word no, how are we going to defend our nation? How do we show respect for our forefathers, or to our forefathers? How do we show our duty to the young people? Because when you think about it, when I was in school, this was already all well in play. When I was in school, it was about duck and cover from the imminent nuclear attack that was going to take place. Now it's duck and cover or give up all your rights in order to save the environment. So we still have the doomsday clock, only it went from a nuclear war scenario to a demise of the environment scenario. Both complete lies, but a lie propagated constantly 24/7 tends to get into people's brains, and they tend to believe it. Kind of like the Holocaust. You know, just keep beating that into your head. No evidence whatsoever. You don't need any evidence. You need absolutely no evidence. You just keep propagating the lie, and don't allow any pushback on the lie, and pretty soon the lie becomes the norm. So this is, I always say, this is a spiritual psychological war, because our spirits have been weakened, and they use psychology to get you to believe things that are absolutely untrue. With no evidence. That's the kicker. No evidence. And the masses believe the story with no evidence. That's spooky. Very spooky stuff. They can make up a lie and go into a country and slaughter the people. And even though there's no evidence to back up what they're talking about, or the reason to bomb a country or whatever, the people willingly believe, even though there's no evidence, well, yeah, we better bomb them now because, well, if we don't, well, they'll probably bomb us, even though they don't have any bombs. But, well, we don't want to take a chance. We better deal with this now. Right? Just kind of like climate change, you know. You're better off to give up all of your rights now in order to save the planet, even though there's no evidence the planet is in any distress whatsoever, which it isn't. But we have to do this so that that the environment doesn't blow up on us, or this other country doesn't come and bomb us, kind of thing. You know. I saw a video last night that I found rather interesting. I was just tripping around last night a little bit. I thought I'd listen to some music or something, and I ran into, I thought I'd listen to some Tom Wilson out of Hamilton, Ontario. And he had this song, Beautiful Scars, and there's some videos. There was a video that was done of it, Beautiful Scars, and I was trying to wrap my brain around what this was about. So I guess Tom has written a book now called Beautiful Scars. And I remember him talking, like he sometimes talked before he played a song or whatever, about growing up in Hamilton and his father was blind. He had been a tail gunner in a Lancaster in the war, and probably from glass or whatever, ended up blind. So he's living in Hamilton, and he noticed that his parents were quite a bit older than his friend's parents. And he'd been lied to his whole life, really, because he thought this was his family. He didn't realize he'd been adopted. And later on, he had an aunt. You know, people say, "Gee, your aunt looks a lot like you." But he always thought that he was. He referred to himself as kind of a white Irish puffy kind of guy. And it wasn't till later on that he realized he's actually a Mohawk. And then he was driving his aunt back from a birthday party or something, and he'd been talking about some people had been talking to him and that. And that's when his aunt, sitting beside him, laid the news on that she was actually his mother. He's a very interesting guy. I mean, I really recommend people go and listen to some of his stuff. And if you just put in Tom Wilson, you know, musician, or Hamilton, Ontario, you'll get. And he's Tom Wilson, but then he had 3 bands as well. He's in Rodeo, Blackie and the Rodeo Kings, and I forget what his other 2 bands are right off, but you'll run into them. And he's cracking 60 now. Very, very intelligent writer, very good musician. But when I was rooting around in some of this stuff, I ran across a video of Buffy Sainte-Marie. Now, Buffy Sainte-Marie can you people just bear with me for a second? How you doing? I'm doing a show right now. Well, I wouldn't mind seeing you. Did you get what I sent you last night? Well, I think that's right on your line, buddy. Yeah, okay. But are you coming in? All right then. Okay. All right. Bye-bye. My apologies for that, but I needed to deal with that. Anyways, so I ran into this video for Buffy Sainte-Marie. Now I ran into a song of hers, and you know, when I was younger, much younger, Buffy Sainte-Marie, she did some pretty decent stuff. Then I ran into a song here that she's, I guess, just put out not too long ago. I don't know when it was put out, but apparently she's 76 in the video. And, there was a time there when she first started out, she was more of a folk singer kind of thing. And then she started driving me nuts when she started all the native stuff, which is really a little difficult for me to listen to. But I always had a lot of respect for her. But then I kind of started losing respect for her because she seemed to get tangled up in this environmental nonsense, this New Age nonsense. And, you know, people who aren't standing back and looking at things with a critical eye sometimes get moved to places if they knew why they were going there, wouldn't go there. So I haven't listened to Buffy in a long time, and just by looking around at some stuff, Tom Wilson, I ran into this song of hers, which is actually a very good song. I don't have it in front of me here right now. But what I did run into, because what they did to the native people, they use everybody. These globalists use everybody for everything. Wherever they can slot them in to move the agenda, they do. But most of the people don't know that they're being moved there or being targeted to move a message that they probably wouldn't otherwise move if they understood at the time what they were involved in. So I was glad to see Buffy. I don't know exactly how old she was or is, but that song that I listened to last night, she was 76 years old, and did a really, really fine job on the tune. Now, I ran into an old video that I think is really important. And it's called Buffy on GMA. And I don't know, 1977. Okay, 1977. The video, this Good Morning America program from 77, Buffy St. Marie debates Rep. Jack Cunningham from Washington on his bill to abolish all U.S. government treaties with American Indian nations called the Native Americans Equal Opportunity Act. Now, the reason this video is so important is that this is what's actually going on here in Canada today. This reconciliation crap, they don't, I mean, if you're a Native person, you listeners, understand Canada is a corporation. It was the corporation that ran you people off your lands. It was the corporation that slaughtered your people. It was a corporation that stole your children and put them in the corporate schools in order to destroy your society and destroy the links between generations of your people. It was not, Wilma and Joe who came over on a boat trying to get out from under the boot of tyranny that was the problem. Although that's how it's spelled out. That's not how it happened. Okay, so, but this thing that Buffy St. Marie is debating with Jack Cunningham back in 77 is exactly what is happening to you Native people in Canada today. And what they were discussing back in 77 is getting rid of the treaties, okay? Because the globalists want control of all resources and all peoples on the planet. Now, in this video here, there's something like 59 million acres or whatever of Indian lands, and they want it. And Buffy did a really great job in this debate. She was actually brilliant. But then later, when I heard her, like all the other musicians in that, yammering on about Mother Earth and all of this stuff, and we're out of water, and which we're not. I don't even know how you sell this stuff, Every single drop of water that was here day one is here today. We're not running out of water. We can't run out of water because there's no plug in the bottom of the tub. We could treat our water better, but we're not running out of water. but this is the garbage that keeps getting played out in the media. And I see so many of these people, including Buffy Sainte-Marie, get caught up in this nonsense and became a spokesperson for human rights, a spokesperson for the environment, and all of this kind of stuff. So, but when I ran into this last night, I thought, hot damn, this is a brilliant, brilliant video. Because it was all the way back from 1997. Now, it was 1976. The Vancouver Habitat, or UN Habitat, the Conference on Human Settlements in Vancouver in 76, which said that all land must be held in the public because private land holdings can accumulate wealth, which is a form of social injustice. So this is right in the same timeline as the UN Conference on Human Settlements in Vancouver. And I mean, this is how long this has been going on, people. You know, like, you got to go read some stuff. You got to do a little background checking. This idea of bitching and complaining about right, left all the time, it just really, truly makes me want to puke, because if that's what you're doing, you know, you're just putting up your flag of ignorance. Okay? That's all you're doing. Because if you are still playing in this political realm and you think this leader or that leader is going to do something good for the country, well, you know, whether it be the red flag, the orange flag, the blue flag that you're flying, it's a flag of ignorance. And that's not a good position to be in. You gotta understand what came before. If you don't understand the history, then you can't understand what's going on today. It's that simple. If you can't understand what's going on today, you can't move anything positive forward. It's just the way it is. So I'm going to put this particular video in the chats, and I don't think I really have to explain it too much. I think Buffy did a brilliant job. But what it's about, and that's what they're doing to the Native people in Canada here now, is they want the Native people to become, I don't know what they call the full citizens or whatever, okay? Like everybody else. They want the Native bands to be able to buy and sell land. They want them to have the opportunity to sell their treaty lands. Because they want control over all the land and all the resources and all of the people. So this is pretty good background. I'm going to go and when I get some time, or if you know some Native people, because I'm very convinced that, you know, a nation divided can't stand. And we're divided between the Native people and the European settlers that came here. We're divided in this political nonsense. We're a very divided people. And they're taking us down because we can't come together. And as far as I'm concerned, that if we can't get the Native people on side, if we can't join forces, if we can join forces with the Native people, then we become extremely strong. But if we can't, then we have, you know, Native Lives Matter, Black Lives Matter. You know, the white people have been picking on us Native people for so long. It's not the white people that are picking on you. It's the same corporation that's picking on the Native people is now picking on the European people of European descent. Okay, we got the same enemy. We're not each other's enemy. Okay, but they've separated us, and we got to come back together. So I'm hoping this video, if you know some Native people, then send it to them. Watch it, understand what's going on in this video, and then send it out if you know Native people with an explanation of what they need to understand in this video. I've never seen this before. I mean, I spend a lot of time looking back at papers and that, you know, from basically the 50s onward, and other papers from way back. But you know, this time frame basically from the 50s to today is what we have to deal with. You know, so they're long-term planners. You know, 1950 Senate hearings, Warburg. There will be a world government by conquest or by consent. Simple as that. Plan was made. And we need global problems that can only be solved at the global level. In other words, they need mechanisms, is how they described it. And that's what they've been doing to us all the way down the line. And we got to get this thing turned around. So, if I can find the chats here, I will stick this in and give it a listen. She's actually very young here, and she's very articulate. She knows what the hell she's talking about. You know, he has one bill that he's talking about, but then she pulls out the other 10 bills that are attached to this thing. I mean, she did her homework. She understood the game, and that was to remove the lands from the Native people. And that's exactly what's going on in here, Canada today, only they're doing it a little bit different. It's not a bill because I don't think it worked in the States. I know it didn't work in the States, but so now they're trying a roundabout on it, telling the Native people that they should have the same right as anybody else, and that is to buy and sell land, which is the end of the Native land. So they're kind of doing a runaround on the treaties kind of thing. They're trying to get well, as Warburg said, to consent. So stick this in here. And you can take Kaboo at it because it is important. And let me see here. I think I'm in the chat here. Oh, that turned out nice. Yeah, so listen to that. It's amazing what you can. Sometimes it really freaks me out. You know, that was late last night when I was doing that, and I just thought I wanted to listen to a couple of tunes or something before I went to bed. And I never. I listened. I didn't listen to any of Tom's stuff because I was listening to an interview of his, and then I saw this older Buffy St. Marie, and I thought, well, I'll plug into this song, and it was a freaking beauty song, man. And then when I was just rooting around, I ran across this video from 1977. So every now and again you trip over something good, but you see, if I didn't have the research background I have, I wouldn't have understood what the hell was going on in this video. You know, I would have just, oh, well, it's just some stupid thing from 1977, some talk show thing, or Good Morning America, and wouldn't have understood what the hell I was looking at. And that's why it's important that we continue to ask questions and we do research. Very important. Now, I think I'll switch gears here a little bit. I was asking myself some questions about my country and the size of it and the number of people in it and the resource base on it. And I've always said for decades now that, and it goes off of that John Lennon song, Imagine, really. Imagine, I don't even know the words to that song, but imagine that there's no other landmass on the planet. Just imagine that. The only piece of ground is what we call Canada. The only population is the 35 million people or 36 million people that call this place home. Then the question becomes, could those 36 million people survive and thrive with what this landmass offers to us? Well, there would be no hunger. There would be no homelessness. The stress level would completely disappear. The people would become happy again. We would make what we need, grow what we need, and be completely and totally self-sufficient. And the question is, well, why aren't we? Well, we basically were at one point. We manufactured what we needed. We grew what we needed. We fed our people. We built what we needed for our people. But the fox, the snakes, and the weasels got into our house and changed the rules. And through an awful lot of propaganda and straight out lies, they convinced us that free trade was the way to go. And don't get me wrong, I'm all for trade, but free trade with no markers on it means whoever has the cheapest labor, you can't compete with. So over time, all of our manufacturing left the country. Now we don't make what we need. We can't even feed ourselves anymore. And they brought that forward in this idea of we're all interdependent upon one another. And the whole plan there is that no country is going to be able to stand on its own 2 feet. That's all part of the plan of the death of nation states, which is all part of the plan of this world government. And in the end, they take control of everything. And then they decide what you can and cannot do, what you can and cannot eat, how much you can eat, what you will live in, where you will live, your lifestyle, everything. So, when people bitch about nationalism, it really makes me nuts. This is our nation. The nation is the people. If you're not a nationalism, then you're a traitor. If you don't believe in your nation, then get out. If you do believe in your nation, then you must defend it. Just like you would defend your house, because your nation is your house. If you have a 1,200 square foot house, you and your wife and your 2 kids are living in the house. If somebody comes in at your house and starts telling you this is how your rules are going to be now because we decided we're going to change them, we're going to coerce you into changing them, you ain't going to put up with it. You need to kick them out of your house. Well, your country is your house. The legislatures they call the house. That's where the house rules are made. Only it's the foxes, the weasels, and the snakes that are making your house rules now. We got to clean out the house. We got to get a boot and boot the weasels, snakes, and foxes out of our house. As long as we allow them to continue to set the rules in our house is not going to be well. Very sick house. So anyways, when I was looking at our house, i.e. our landmass, our country, and I'd done this before, farting around, like I think I took 4 Englands and dropped them into Ontario, and they fit with quite a bit of room left over, and that would have put a population in here of about 250,000 people, or 250 million people, into the province of Ontario. If you take, the land mass and the population base of England and drop it in here, we'd have about 250 million people in this province with room left over. And so we have a very tiny population. We have 15 million people. Most of it lives within a few miles of the American border. And the rest, for all intents and purposes, basically empty. Where I live on Lake Huron, the biggest town outside of Kitchener or London or Toronto, so Toronto's about 2 hours from here, London's about 2 hours, and Kitchener's about an hour and a half. So, roughly an hour, almost 2 hours from here. Once you leave that population base down there, most of the towns north of London, Toronto, and Kitchener, going up towards Lake Huron, Georgian Bay, the biggest town we have is 20,000 people. Most of the towns here, which are spread normally about 30 miles apart on average, is running about between 6,000 and 8,000 people. Yet we can't deal with our own house. We have to have somebody from outside deal with our house. That's horseshit. Excuse my language. But I got looking at it from a little bit different angle. Yeah, pretty much the same, but I got looking around about population bases and sizes and that. And what really irritates me more than anything, I think, in this country is the stupidity of the people who get conned into this environmental movement. It really makes me sort of irritated that my people could be this totally stupid. Well, we got to save the environment. Oh, my God. Well, I invite everybody in Canada to grab a drinking straw and come on over to my town, which is on Lake Huron, and, bring the whole damn worksy over here, and we'll each give you a drinking straw. We'll give each of you a drinking straw, and you can go down to the Lake Huron there, and you drink your drinking straw in the lake, and I'd like you all to just suck on those straws, and see how long it takes you to drain the lake. Well, it ain't ever going to happen. That's one lake in this massive country. But people are still, oh yeah. And here's the other kicker. We'll have to use paper straws because I saw something they want to ban plastic straws because apparently plastic straws are a huge detriment to the environment. They work it down, eh? So pretty soon your toenail's going to be an environmental problem if you clip your toenails. So now people are going to be out there going, Oh, don't use that. That's a plastic straw. Like, shut up. Anyways, just to put this country into some sort of perspective, I went and I looked for the largest city, most populous city on the planet. And it happens to be Tokyo, which has a Metro Tokyo, has 38 million people in it. 38 million people in Metro Tokyo. The population of Canada, which is the second largest landmass on the country behind Russia, has 35, 36 million people in it. Yet Tokyo, metropolitan Tokyo, has a larger population than the entire country of Canada. And Canadians are running around, oh my God, the environment. Look there's nobody here. The Canadian environment doesn't notice you're even here. There's so few of you. Now, I did say many decades ago that the problem with Canada was our small population. And my thought process at the time, when I did the numbers in that, was that we needed a population of around a good, comfortable population for this country would be around 60 million people. And then we have the numbers for our manufacturers. And you're still not going to notice 60 million people in the whole country of Canada, but environmentally sound. And then we have a population we can feed, a population we can produce for. And again, at that point, the rest of the world will go suck air and take a hike because we're in a perfect position. But I wanted our same fabric of our society, which would mean that we would need to breed and we would need to bring in European immigrants to this country, because a country that is divided ain't going to stand. And that's the whole point of what they're doing today, is they are bringing in, Toronto, 122 different, I didn't know there was 122 different languages on the planet. Toronto is put up now as the most diverse, inclusive city on the planet or something. Now, where Tokyo has 38 million people, Metro Tokyo, those are Japanese people. Okay? That's their society. Whereas our population grows, is the demise of our society. Not too freaking bright, folks. The other interesting thing I found out about the numbers was when I was looking for a place that in Canada that had about the same land area as Metro Tokyo, and I really couldn't find anything that was easily to understand. So what I ended up with was Vancouver Island, of which I lived on, and it's a nice place, but it's a good sized island, but it's still an island. You have to get off it every now and again. I don't know why that is, but Vancouver Island is plenty big. You could live there your whole life, and you'd be fine. So I was looking for a place. So I looked up the land size of Metro Tokyo. And Vancouver Island, you can see it on a map. A lot of people have been there. So when you take Metro Tokyo, which is 38 million people, and you drop it onto Vancouver Island, Metro Tokyo takes up a little less than half the size of Vancouver Island. So you have a population greater than Canada living in a place that's a little less than half the size of Vancouver Island. So this idea that if you live in Canada and they're calling you a water hog and an energy hog and all this, next time somebody says, just punch them in the face for me, will you? Don't you take responsibility for the punch, okay? Just say it's from Ron, okay? And then they can track my ass down. Or give them a cuff up in the head, or ask them if, how long they've been stupid. We have, the people in this land have no apparent capacity to understand the size of this land and how little possible environmental harm that we could do to it. When you look at the amount of forest in this country, okay, and you're talking about carbon sinks, and they want to give you put a carbon tax on you for what? Any carbon that we possibly produce here is nullified by just our bush alone. But none of these plans come from here. That's the problem. None of these plans that are being implemented upon you come from here. And somehow they manage to get people to believe their nonsense. That's how stupefied we've become. Now, if you take the country of Japan, which has 126 million people on it, now where could we stick that? Here. So I looked around and tried different places, different provinces and this and that to see if I could find somewhere to stick it that would be somewhere in the range of the same landmass. And the best place I found to stick Japan was Newfoundland, Labrador, or Labrador, Newfoundland, whatever you want to call it. So I think Newfoundland, Labrador, it's around 100,000 square kilometers or miles bigger than Japan, but that was about as close as I get to get something. So Newfoundland, Labrador is bigger than Japan, but within reason. I think Japan is 300 and some thousand square kilometers or whatever, and Newfoundland is 400. So it's reasonably close. So you can go and you can take the whole damn country, Japan, lift it up, drag it over here, drop it into Newfoundland, Labrador, and not only does it fit, you got a whole lot of extra room. That's a population of 126 million people. I mean, I'm just trying to get this into your head that all of this environmental nonsense that's being pumped into the children's minds in the school and pumped into the regulatory rules and regulations is 100% complete and total lie. But then where does all this stuff come from? These rules, regulations, statutes, and nonsense come from? They come from what they call the House. Those who make the rules, regulations of the House, which is your country, or in the case of Ontario, your province. That's the provincial House. You have a municipal House, you got a county House, you got a provincial House, and you got a federal House. And then you got your House. But all of these other houses are implementing the rules and regulations for your House. And they are all working for the wrong side. They're all working together to diminish your true rights, to diminish the idea of a nation state. And this is a war. But the Canadian people in general seem so totally ignorant. It's mind-boggling. I mean, go take your map and I don't care, you take Japan, take anywhere. And just, I mean, when you think about this, you can take Japan and stuff it on the east coast of Canada with 126 million people, and then turn around and say that we're destroying the environment. You can't go there. It doesn't work. You know, it just does not work. Now, I see by the clock, I got to get a hold of Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, because there's supposed to be a break at the top of the hour, and I'm either not hearing the in and out music, or it ain't being played. But it's 50, what is it, 56. I'll hang here till 58, and if I don't hear something, I'm going for a smoke. And you folks will have to amuse yourselves till I get back, which will be about 4 minutes. Once I change my time slot from Saturday night over to Sunday afternoon, it kind of worked for the first time or two, but now I'm not hearing any intro or in and out music, so I will have to deal with that, I guess, because it's an irritation for everybody, and we'll try and get that straightened out. But like I said, I've been very busy with some other matters that have to be dealt with, so you just have to bear with me. Oh, I think I heard a little blurb there. So yeah, I hear it just slightly in the background, bouncing in and out, so that sounds like music. So we're going to take our break. This is Rock the Boat, right here on Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, also being played over to UCY.tv on Sundays, and we shall be back in about 4 minutes. welcome back. I'm your host, Ron Stevens. This is Rock the Boat right here on Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. This is the second hour, and I want to take this opportunity to remind people that these networks that give us airtime, we donate our time. None of these hosts get paid unless I'm missing something, which I don't think I am. These networks are for the absolute most part listener supported. Very important that you reach into your pocket and donate to these networks, because it's about the only voice we got. Most of what goes on in the internet is at best controlled opposition, and you have to be aware of that. Facebook is I mean, I spend most of my time in their jail, just most of the internet is not a good situation. It was set up to drag you in and put junk in your head and control you. So you have to be very astute at what you're dealing with. I knew Facebook was a collection or a collector before I ever got involved in it, but my blogs were getting kind of shut down, and there was a place that I could move some stuff pretty quick to, and get anywhere from 10 to 40,000 views in a day. But they're not letting me do that anymore. They've pretty well shut that down on me. So this is my place that I can speak as I wish, say what I want, and hopefully it resonates with some of the listeners. So when you reach in your pocket to pull out $5 or $10 or $20 or whatever to donate to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, just remember that is your decision. It's one of the few times it's not the government's hand in your pocket pulling your money out in order to fund their programs, which are designed to basically destroy you and your family. So this is your opportunity to spend a few dollars the way you wish to spend it, not the way the government wishes to spend it. Now, where do we go from here? Let's see. If we can find anything interesting here, I'm going to buzz through some news real quick and see if I can find anything of any interest. Where was I before? Technology and science. I looked at this. This kills me. I mean, science really kills me. I don't know too many things that irritate me more than science. Science is, you might as well, go to a parlor with someone, a dark little parlor with some weird shit hanging around, with somebody sitting at a table with a crystal ball and telling you the future. That's what I see when I think of the word science. Science is observation, basically. And but these people don't observe anything. They just they predict. So they might as well have the tarot cards or the crystal ball. And then, like some people do, they believe what the tarot cards say, or they believe what the crystal ball says. But the majority of people aren't involved in that. Yet, when you bring it and you switch it over to science, if you say, well, I'm going to go down and see the person with the crystal ball and they're going to predict the future. What are you, nuts? Would be the general attitude of the general population. But when you say science, oh, the science says, oh, well, then that's different. No, it's not. It's the same stupid game. Now, I was reading an article last night, or I went through a few of these things last night. I don't usually hang out in science and technology because it doesn't really interest me that much. But I ran into, if I can find that again. Oh, look at this. A long-lost chunk of Canada found in Australia. Well, that's interesting. Brains of woodpeckers. Now, you see, all of this science is paid for out of your pocket. Now, I know some of this stuff is semi-important, but most of it is just, well, dumb. Brains of woodpeckers contain protein found in humans with brain damage. Huh? Scientists wonder if the head-banging birds can shed light on concussions or other brain conditions. Well, I don't think so, because the woodpecker is built to dig holes in trees. That's what it does. That's how it digs out its food. And it's not a retarded bird that's going around banging his head on a concrete wall because it's brain damaged. But they tie this stuff together. Why, I don't know, because you don't need to be real bright to understand that some guy running his head into a wall is somehow the same as a woodpecker beating on a tree. There's no correlation there whatsoever, but science likes to try to make these correlations because, well, they get funded. They get funded for this. I was really looking for a here's one that I looked at last night. And why I hate science so much, is because when I was a kid, I was told that oil comes from rotting dinosaur carcasses. And that's what they taught us in grade school. It's where oil comes from. Not that it's a naturally occurring substance of the earth, but that it was dinosaurs. And I didn't learn until way long later that there was no such word as dinosaur until the mid-19th century, which is when these people came up with evolution. Now, the Earth burped lava after being smashed by a dinosaur-killing asteroid. And again, there was no such word as dinosaur till the mid-19th century. But a bang makes for a burp. A giant impact 66 million years ago. Now you gotta understand the language they use. But see, this is coming from a science base. So when they say it is a scientific fact or a scientific discovery or a scientific this or that, they've already put in your mind that you're to believe this. All right? It's already set in your mind to believe it. And so you don't pay much attention to the way it's written because you've already accepted it that these are scientists. They must know. Now, there's no possible way in hell that anybody can there's no way that anybody can make a statement that a giant impact 66 million years ago, they can't even start there. Okay? They have no basis for that. That's the crystal ball. So a giant impact 66 million years ago might have hit the Earth hard enough to cause our planet to leak lava, contributing to mass extinction. So that's the first sentence in this. Well, there's nothing in that first sentence that can be proven. They can't prove anything happened 66 million years ago. Now, a giant impact 66 million years ago, might have hit the Earth hard enough to cause our planet to leak lava, contributing to mass extinction, says the crystal ball. The Chicxulub crater, which is centered and this is the other problem, okay? They don't have any proofreaders. So the crater, which is centered just of the Vatican, or the Yucatan Peninsula, just of what? Centered just of left, right, north, south, what? Put a word in there. Of the Yucatan Peninsula of Mexico was created when an asteroid or comet at least 10 kilometers across slammed into the Earth at roughly 70,000 kilometers an hour. The energy of the impact is estimated to be equivalent to 10 billion Hiroshima atomic bombs. Well, it's estimated. Might have hit. Evidence suggests is, if you look up the word suggest in etymology, and if you don't have the etymology online dictionary, get it, bookmark it, use it. This is the origins of the words and the original meanings of the words. And so many of the words used today, if you look it up in etymology, go say, what? I didn't know it meant that. Okay? Ignorance is not bliss. It's dangerous. So, evidence suggests, and if you look up the word suggest, you will see the word hypnotize. In other words, they put suggestions into your head. All you people in the front row are now, when I snap my fingers, are chickens. Now dance around and the audience will laugh. And then when I re-snap my fingers, you'll be people again. That's suggest. Evidence suggests it caused a global firestorm followed by a massive climate disruption. 75% of our planet's species died, including the dinosaurs, which the word didn't exist till the mid-19th century. Eruptions might have been an extinction double tap. That's not the whole story, according to research by Dr. Leif Kernstrom from the Department of Earth Sciences at the University of Oregon. He and his colleague Joseph Bryans found evidence that the impact also caused massive leaking or burping of magma along weak spots in the Earth's crust, the mid-ocean ridges. The impact was so violent that it shook the entire planet, says Karlstrom. The Chicxulub impact radiated seismic waves that were much larger by orders of magnitude than any tectonic earthquake and those were powerful enough to flush out magma or cause this burp along mid-ocean ridges globally. It was difficult evidence to find. This busts me up, man. It was difficult evidence to find, says Karlstrom. No doubt, because it doesn't exist. Magma flows from the mid-ocean ranges more or less constantly. The team had to survey the entire ocean floor globally, because it always has to be a global problem, folks, to look for signs that more magma had been produced after the impact 66 million years ago, 2 weeks, 3 hours, and 47 minutes. That's how accurate these scientists are. I put the last part in myself. It's a bit tricky, no doubt. It's a bit tricky to do this, he says. We have better topographic maps of the surface of Mars and Venus than we do of the ocean floor. But new topographic information has become available from satellite data that help them. Now, satellite data, I remember before the Iraq War, the black guy, I forgot what his name is now, that was always spewing this off. The hell was his name? Anyway, it doesn't matter. And they had satellite imagery of these trailers that were producing nuclear weapons in Iraq. Now, they were super grainy. The visuals was very bad on purpose because all they were was trailers. And but they spun this off to the people from satellite data that we can depend on. No, a bunch of bullcrap you made up to try to coerce the people into believing that Iraq was in the process of creating nuclear weapons. So satellite data, I'm not too fussy on that either. But new topographic information become available from satellite data that help them. Help them what? I don't know. Now, these satellites monitor the height of surface of the ocean and see where there are bumps. Where the surface of the ocean is slightly elevated, this is caused by extra material at the bottom of the sea exerting slightly higher gravitational attraction on the water, piling up a little bit of extra water. Using this data, they were able to find evidence of huge amounts of extra magma flow on the sea floor, dating back to the time of the impact. They estimate that at least 100,000 cubic kilometers of extra material flowed into the oceans, enough to cover all of North America 40 meters deep. Really. Now that kind of runs with the nonsense of the global warming thing, where the ice is going to melt and everything is going to be under water. Now the movie, you can look it up, or you can go to my blog, CanadianTruths.wordpress.com, and just look up, what would we look up there? Goddess Unchained, I guess you could put in the search. That should bring it up. Which is a movie made in 1958, which is 8 years after Warburg said there would be a world government and they needed mechanisms. One of those mechanisms is global warming, man-caused global warming. And in that 1958 film, which was a Hollywood production, it is early Al Gore. And in that movie, these scientists are discussing the fact that if we don't get rid of carbon dioxide, that in a short period of time, all of the ice is going to melt. And Miami, the towers of Miami will be under 100 feet of water, and it will become a tourist attraction for people, tourists in glass-bottom boats, to view Miami through the bottom of the boats. So, these people are just lunatics as far as I'm concerned. This, they suspect, may have contributed to the mass extinction. This, they suspect, may have, whoa, a lot of hardcore thought process there. This, they suspect, may have contributed to the mass extinction following the comet's impact. Parts of that extinction event are still unexplained. No, really? Including evidence for changes in the chemistry of the oceans that wouldn't have occurred as a direct result of the impact. They hope to investigate this further to determine if the huge flow of lava into the oceans resulted in ocean acidification or other changes in ocean chemistry that could have contributed to the devastation of ocean life after the impact. And people will read this and believe it. Which takes me back to those two young guys I spoke to who had college degrees on water management, who I spoke to in different places at different times, about the same age they were. And I got yammering on about the environment or something, and they said that we were running out of water. And the first time I heard this from a graduate, I thought, well, this guy's just stupid. The second time I heard it, I went, oh my God, they're teaching this crap. So this guy tells me that we're running out of water. And I said, well, that's not possible because we're hermetically sealed and every drop of water that was here day one is here today. So how is it we're possibly running out of water? Well, he says, then he's changed his tune a little. He says, well, no, I don't mean water. Well, that's what you said, but okay, what do you got? Well, no, we're running out of fresh water. All right, how's that? And he went on to explain to me why we're running out of fresh water. This is a graduate. Understand, this is a graduate of water program. And he went on to tell me that, that the snow falls down or the rain falls down and the snow melts and then it goes into the watershed and goes down the rivers and eventually ends up in the ocean. And I said, yeah, I've been doing that a long time too. And he said, yes, but once the water goes into the ocean, it becomes salinated. Uh-huh. And remember, this is a graduate. And he said, well, then it's gone. And I said, like, did you miss the class on evaporation? Like, see, what they've done is they've taken our earth cycles and our life cycles in that, and they've broken the circle. All over the place they've broken the circle, the cycle. It's the same thing with CO2. They're not teaching these kids any realities. So I thought this kid, I just asked him, like, did you miss a class or did your teacher forget something or what? And I thought, okay, I just kind of threw that out. But then, I don't know, within a couple of months, I ran into another graduate of water management. And I got the verbatim story from him. I went, holy crap. So, and then they turn into scientists. And then we listen to this crap I just read. And people believe them because they have a degree in stupid or something. I don't know how that operates. Nobody wants to challenge anything anybody says. Challenge me all you want. I appreciate it. But these guys cannot prove anything they say, which means that what they're saying is nothing, but they're making suggestions in your mind and messing with your head. And we got to call them out on that. There's some other stories in here. When our magnetic fields flip, say goodbye to modern life. And I guess we'll have to bring out the Flintstones again. So instead of, Tesla cars being electric cars, the new Tesla car will be the stone-wheeled, push-it-with-your-feet Flintstones vehicle after the magnetic field flips. There's another one. Scientists figure out how to wipe out all life on Earth. Well, that's an interesting headline. You know, the scientists are busy figuring out how to wipe out all life on Earth. Well, geez, that makes me pretty happy to know that scientists are out there working on these things. And another one here, seeds save dinosaurs and birds from mass extinction. Well, if the seeds save dinosaur birds, not dinosaurs on the ground, but dinosaur birds from mass extinction. And I guess they evolved into chickadees. You know, this is all fiction. Like in science fiction. Now, I didn't look at this, and I'm going to look at it. When our magnetic fields flip, say goodbye to modern life. Scientists say the magnetic North Pole will eventually switch places with the South Pole, with potentially apocalyptic results. The Earth's magnetic field is enormously important. It is a vital shield that protects us and our technological society from dangerous radiation from the sun and deep space that would otherwise scorch us and blow our electrical system and electronics into smithereens. In her new book, The Spinning Magnet, the Electronic Force That Created the Modern World and Could Destroy It, Canadian journalist Alana Mitchell looks at the disaster scenario. She talks to scientists who are investigating the vital role of our magnetic field that the magnetic field plays, and why they're concerned about how our planet will lose protection from solar radiation storms that will wipe out all electromagnetic technology. The result would be no satellites, no internet, no smartphones, and maybe no power grid at all. This transcript has been edited for length and clarity. Bob McDonald is the guy that runs the Canadian Brainwashing Corporation radio show called Quirks and Quarks. So we know that this is to put suggestion into your mind. So Bob asked, now you start this book in a canvas tent in the late Arctic summer. What brought you up there? Mitchell, I was in search of Franklin, Sir John Franklin. He was part of what's known as the Magnetic Crusade. Really, it was the first international collaboration of science, and they were trying to figure out, how the magnetic field worked. Bob asks, trying to figure out where magnetic north is? Mitchell, that was part of it, but they were also trying to figure out how they could be sure that their compass readings were correct, and they never cracked it. Bob asks, what did you see when you were up there? Well, what I saw was the Aurora Borealis, so I was in my canvas tent, actually, on muskox skin up in the far north on King William Island, and the Aurora Borealis began. It's just this glorious dance of color. It just draws you in, and you just feel extraordinarily alive to look at this. And I started to wonder, what is it? What is that? How then do the aurora relate to what's going on deep within the Earth? Asked Bob. Well, the aurora are disturbances in our Earth's magnetic field that are caused by disturbances in the sun's magnetic field, and occasionally they interact, and that causes all this turbulence in our atmosphere, which we perceive as these dancing lights in the atmosphere. But the fact that we have a magnetic field at all is a result of these torturous emanations in the outer molten liquid core of the Earth. It's those the shedding of heat from the solid core that create this gigantic magnetic shield that protects our planet from the solar radiation. Bob, now it took quite a while for scientists to figure that out, that the Earth was generating a magnetic field and producing this, what they called a strange force that pulled the compass. Tell me a little bit about your journey of discovery. What fascinated me, says Mitchell, what fascinated them was magnetism. But it seemed to be the great conundrum of various ages and electricity, which is, of course, connected to magnetism. The electromagnetic forces is one of the four fundamental forces of the universe, but electricity was seen as a sort of poor cousin that was shuffled off into the corner until a Danish scientist did an experiment in 1820 that proved that they were physically connected. And then the entire thing just changed. Bob, well, you've spent a lot of time in your book sort of talking about magnetism, but you also talk about the switching of the magnetic field. Tell me about that. Well, that was, again, in a really long journey. It began in 1905 with a French geophysicist named Brunches in the middle of France. He took a ride on a horse with his chisels to the southwest because he'd heard that there was a seam of terracotta that was overladen with some volcanic ballast. But he discovered that at the time, the ballast had been laid down by the volcano and then had cooled down again at that moment, which was, as we now know, 5 million years earlier, the poles had been on different sides of the planet than they were in 1905. He did the test, and this is what was just a revolutionary idea. They had no way of explaining this. It was really an assault on the scientific premise of the day about magnetism. It really literally turned everything upside down. So according to this, the poles at some point were on opposite ends, if I read that right, which I think it did. So so he said he found that the pole was different 5 million years ago. Now, since then, how often have we found out that the Earth's poles actually do switch? Mitchell says they've switched hundreds of times in general, you could say, since the last mass extinction 65 million years ago. Well, that's not right, because the first story I read, it was 66 million years ago. At least get your numbers right, people, right? I mean, you just did a story, said it was 66 million years ago, now it's 65 million years ago. If you can't even get that right and make that consistent, then everything else you're yakking about is a crock of nonsense. In general, they've switched about every 300,000 years. The last time was 780,000 years ago. Well, wait a minute. In general, they've switched about every 300,000, but the last time was 780,000 years ago. Occasionally, you know that the poles get very disturbed, and they try to switch, and then they snap back to where they were before. This called an excursion that happened 40,000 years ago. And Bob asked, does that mean that we're overdue for another reversal? Well, Mitchell says they're saying we can't say that. Well, of course not, because you're scientists. We can't say that they're going to reverse just because we think it's time. They're looking at other characteristics of the field to determine whether or not the poles are beginning to reverse. Bob says, so what about if another reversal should come along? What are scientists concerned about? Now, I've been waiting for California to fall off of America and into the ocean since I was a child. It ain't happened yet, but science suggested that. They still suggested it. But I don't know what the hell they're talking about. So what is science concerned about? The thing that really the most worried about is all that extra solar and galactic radiation will affect the electronic and electric structures of the Earth. That's the sort of the first thing on their mind or on their list. So the shield is generated within this outer liquid metallic core within our planet, and it reaches way out into the magnosphere or magnetosphere surrounding the planet. Think of it like a big octopus. I think she's describing the UN there. The huge big bulb that goes toward the sun and then comes in at the poles and then streams out behind the planet. This is our field that is generated within our planet, and it protects us from all solar and galactic radiation. It's sort of like a cocoon, So when the poles are reversing, this field that is such a protective shield gets diminished. It wanes, it decays. Scientists say down up to about 10% of its usual strength. And what that means is that the solar and galactic radiation that is out there in this very turbulent outer space is filled with all these incredibly dangerous stuff. And that is able to get closer and closer to the surface of the Earth. It will reach further into the atmosphere and will scorch or scotch. It will scotch much of the electric grid and electronics that our planet currently lies on. I think that should say scorch, and I think the last word should say relies on. But then hell, I ain't a scientist. Well, says Bob, tell me about that. What's vulnerable if our magnetic field gets weakened and radiation from space penetrates deeper in? Well, says Mitchell, you could think of all the interconnected transformers that allow electricity to run from where it's generated to where we use it. So when you get these magnetic pulses into the atmosphere, it just runs along these lines that we very handily created. We've had examples of this before because there have been what we call solar storms, really intense episodes where the sun really just chucks off all of this really intense energy. Well, you mentioned in your book in 2012, I don't get that either, but anyways. Mitchell responds, this is the thing that just everybody just sat up to attention. Every now and again, the scientists don't know how often, but the last time was in 1859. There's something that's called just a real superstorm. So this is something that is the most extreme type of solar radiation that hits the planet by radiation. I mean pulses of this invisible stuff, not the light, solar energetic particles that can damage life. So we had a huge solar storm that hit the planet in 1859 called the Carrington event. The one in 59 happened just as humanity had laid down all these telegraphic wires and telegraph lines were actually bursting into fire. The scientists knew that something like of that Carrington class might come again. And in 2012 it did, except that the sun was turned away from the Earth when that intense pulse of energy erupted. Had we been facing the sun at the time, a week or 10 days earlier, that incredibly strong pulse of energy would have struck the Earth. They reckon that power structures would have gone down for decades. Now, I'm not a scientist. I don't pretend to be a scientist, but unless somebody can clue me in here, in 2012, it did accept that the sun was turned away from the Earth. Well, wait a minute here. The Earth's spinning, so one side of the Earth is facing the sun and the other side is not. So none of this makes any sense, because if this, where is this? The sun was turned away from the Earth when that intense impulse of energy erupted. Had we been facing the sun at the time, well, one side of the Earth is always facing the sun, as far as I understand anyways. So if the Earth had been facing the sun at the time, a week or 10 days earlier, we would have an incredible problem. Now it's sunny out now, which is nice because it's not really sunny here much in the wintertime. So I take it we're facing the sun. And then it's going to get dark tonight, and I would take it we're not facing the sun. And then tomorrow morning, we slowly get to the sun, and then it gets dark again. So I don't know what the hell they're talking about here. If the Earth was facing the sun 10 days earlier, I don't get any of that shit. But then I'm not a scientist. But then I don't believe the scientists either. So anyways, this thing goes on here. Anyways, we'll go back down here to Bob, and what did he suggest could have happened to different parts of the planet had that storminess been in effect? I don't know if that's a scientific term or what, storminess. And Mitchell says what they said was that we would have gone back to Victorian times, pre-electric times, for an extended period of time because we don't have a big stash of transformers that we could just slot into place to replace the ones that have been damaged. Bob, what's his take on if the magnetic poles reverse or if the magnetic field disappears? What does he think it will do to planet Earth? Well, he thinks part of the planet will become uninhabitable. Really, says Bob. Yeah, says Mitchell. He thinks that there will be enough ionizing radiation, damaging radiation from the sun, from the galaxy, to make parts of the planets inhospitable to life. Do you know which part? Asked Bob. No, that's the problem, says Mitchell. Wouldn't it be great to know? There's no way of predicting what would cause the Earth to become uninhabitable in those places. What would radiation do? Asked Bob. Well, it would hit the surface of the planet, so you get this ionizing radiation with its X-rays and gamma rays, and actually some of the ultraviolet radiation would also be hitting parts of the planet that it doesn't hit now because, well, the protective ozone layer would be quite stripped away across the parts of the Earth. You get all that extra ultraviolet radiation coming down to the Earth. Bob says, scorched Earth? Mitchell, sounds like in parts, sounds like science fiction, doesn't it? Yeah, it does sound like science fiction because, well, it is science fiction. As I started to piece this together, it was just such an extraordinary story because we don't think about it. I mean, I don't even think about the magnetic fields, much less that it's so turbulent and so volatile and that is subject to change. Daniel Barker is an expert in how the radiation of the sun in outer space interacts with the Earth. So he is saying, well, you know what? We have to look at this, he says. We simply just can't look at it and see what we can do to protect ourselves from harm. I mean, this crap. These people are paid uh, to move this nonsense forward. Like I said, I've been waiting for California to drop off into the Pacific Ocean since I was a young child. You know? And when I was young, 15 years old, and I'd been taught that oil comes from rotting carcasses of dinosaurs. And back in the day when I was like 15 and I was working at a gas station, and when we still had that propaganda, you know, we didn't have, we didn't have regular and premium back then, okay? We had different sources, you know, Tyrannosaurus Rex or whatever they call that. We called premium, and Brontosaurus was more of your regular gas. So fill her up with Rex, will ya? Give me some Brontosaurus. That was our different octane levels of dinosaur rotting carcass gas or oil. Back in the day, of course. Now we just have regular and premium. It's so totally, completely ridiculous. And they use all of this nonsense, and they teach it in school, and it's all about fear. It's all about leading you around by the nose using fear. And where they used to lead us around by the nose fearing nuclear war, now it's climatic or Earth destruction. And you will always be tagged to it because it's something you did that is causing this problem. So you go back to the Club of Rome. Who is the enemy? Man is the enemy. You are the enemy. You are the one that is wrecking the planet. You are the one that exhale CO2. It's all about you. That's why we have to carbon tax your sorry ass. Because it is you that is the problem. And if you believe that, well, you need to seek help. If you believe you're the problem and that the earth is in imminent danger if you don't hand over all of your rights, all of your resources to a small group of total psychopaths, if you believe this for a second, then seek help. Because you're mentally ill. You've allowed yourself to be like the hypnotist does, turn you into a bunch of clucking chickens of which the audience laughs at. Now I'm going to snap my fingers here before this show ends, and I want you to stop being the sheep you've been. I want you to stop wandering around believing all this bullshit that's being fed to you 24/7. I want you to wake up. You're not a sheep. You're a man or you're a woman, and you need to get your act together because you can't help your family. You can't help your country as long as you're wandering around buying like a bunch of stupid sheep that were hypnotized from men into something that the audience can laugh at. The only problem is the hypnotist only hypnotizes a few people so the majority can laugh. What they've done here is they've hypnotized the majority, and those who weren't hypnotized are not laughing because it ain't funny. Okay, so you got to do some study. You got to pay attention. You got to wake up. And I have deprogrammed several people, and it's freaky because they don't even know that they were coerced into believing this nonsense. Once they realize, it's like the snap of the fingers when they finally pop out of this trance they've been in, this induced trance, this hypnotic state that they've been wandering around in, this believing that they're something they're not. And I'm not kidding you. Each time I've deprogrammed someone face to face, when that light goes off, their eyes get incredibly bright. And they see. And once you see, you cannot not see. And once you know, you cannot not know. And at that point, you can no longer be deceived. And that's where we have to get our population to. Because if we can't get people to see and to know,
question everything.
We're out of time, everybody. Take care.
Radio for intelligent people. UCY.TV.
Right, we'll see you. Cheers.